Welcome to Let's Think, the Voluntaryist radio show. And this is Shepard. I am your host. And today we're going to kind of go back to the basics on something. I realized something yesterday. I was speaking with a friend and learned that he has a new friend who turns out to be a communist. And I said, wow, that's neat. I ought to have her on the show sometime. And so he says, yeah, I'll talk to her about it. He did. And she was just kind of curious about voluntarism, what it is. Because we've heard of this term, maybe. Many people haven't. And a lot of people will think that the word voluntarism has something to do with volunteering, volunteerism, and they are different things. So what is voluntarism? And I thought, there isn't really a good short, 5, 10, 15-minute introduction to voluntarism that talks about the basics, what it is, what it isn't. And I thought, why don't I do that? And so that's how we're going to start the show out today. Thank you for joining us, and we're going to have a good old time. And as always, please be in contact. This is a community of people who like to think. And if you're a thinker, we want to hear from you. Please do be in touch. We rely on you to make this interactive fun and to make sure we're providing the right content for you that you're interested in. So what is voluntarism? I need to be careful as I discuss it because, as with any concept, it's easy to start out with something and then add all of our own ideas to it and then begin to think that all of our own ideas are also an integral part of that original thing. And what I mean by this is, perhaps a farmer is a person who plants food or plant seeds. The seeds grow up, harvest the new plants and turn it into something usable. Maybe that's what a farmer does. But then one farmer says, well, I also like to listen to the birds sing. And then it would be easy for that person to give the definition of farming, the rough, ineloquent one that I just gave, and then add to it, and farmers like to listen to birds sing. Well, no, you can still be a farmer without enjoying listening to birds sing. And I want to make sure that I'm intellectually honest and don't do that with my description of what voluntarism is and what it is not. So the first thing that I think we should cover about voluntarism is that all voluntarists that I have ever heard of or know of, one of the foundations is the belief in self-ownership. We each own ourselves, and part of owning ourselves is owning the fruits of our actions. So not only do I own my body, and you do not have a claim upon my body, but you don't have a claim upon what I produce with my body. And so this is kind of where the free market aspect comes into voluntarism. A voluntarist believes that if a human being walks out into the woods and sees a stick laying there and picks up the stick and sharpens an end of it and turns it into a spear, and then is walking along and so another person comes up and says, hey, that's a nice spear you have there. Can I buy it? Well, the voluntarist believes that spear is, in fact, the property of the person that used their energy, their imagination, their human creativity, and created a useful tool out of it. And the person who wants to now acquire that spear has no right to it unless he can voluntarily persuade the other person to give it to him. And that would be done usually through trading one thing of value for another thing of value. So this self-ownership concept is not just owning your body, but also owning your labor, the fruits of your labor, etc. So the opposite of self-ownership would be public ownership or collectivism, community ownership. And this is kind of the concept it's an opposite one, but it's gaining some popularity. The idea that human beings do not belong to themselves, they belong to the commune, and they should get credit within the commune based on how good and obedient of a citizen they are. And that's kind of the opposite of self-ownership. Self-ownership says we each get to choose for ourselves what we do. Voluntarists are very strong believers that slavery is wrong. Voluntarists back in the mid to late 1800s, Lysander Spooner was a big-time fighter of slavery. He was an abolitionist and wrote extensively about it. So that's kind of one foundation of voluntarism is self-ownership. And then the next big thing is that all interactions should be voluntary. And we already touched on that a bit when giving the example of the spear. But everything should be voluntary. And that's kind of the measuring stick that we hold up to something. So if somebody walks up to me and says, hey, look at those guys over there. One of them just gave the other guy $100, and that other guy gave the other one a chair. Is that okay? And then I would look at that and say, well, did they each want to do that? Yep, it was done voluntarily. Yep, that's completely a good thing. And then I would look over and I would see two gals that were wanting to get married. And somebody would say, hey, do you think that's okay? And I'd say, well, do they both want to do that? And they say, yep, they do. And I'd say, well, then, according to voluntarism, that is just fine. And then I look over and I see one guy punching another person. And I say, is that okay in voluntarism? Well, is it voluntary? No, the one person doesn't want to get punched. So in that interaction, only one person is getting what they want, which is doing the punching. The other person is not getting what they want. So I would say that hitting other people, initiating violence, that would be in very direct opposition to voluntarism. And let's take another example of something that voluntarists might not like. And that would be if one person is taking something from another person without that person's permission, stealing from them, a thief. A voluntarist would say, well, no, that's not voluntary. If the person had asked, the taker of the thing had said, hey, brother, I'm really thirsty, and I see you have some water there. May I have a glass of water? And the person who had rightful property ownership of the water said, yeah, absolutely, neighbor, here you go. Well, then everything is voluntary, and we're good with that. But if the thirsty man says, give me that water or I will beat you up, or give me that water or I'll come back next year and beat you up, or do something nasty to you, then that would be theft of the extortion variety. And that would not be acceptable to a voluntarist. And so those are kind of just the basics of voluntarism. And we can go much deeper into the nuances of it, but I would almost argue that I have no claim to properly describe what voluntarism is. And I don't think it's a complete system for developing one's worldviews, how we approach life. I don't think it's a complete system. I think it is a part of a system, but then we would also add other things. Like for me, I like the idea of adding a strong work ethic and personal responsibility. However, you can still be a voluntarist. You can still be a good card-carrying member of the voluntarism tribe and not be a hard worker and not accept personal responsibility. So just being a voluntarist isn't all that is needed in life. I think we need to add things. And every philosopher, and when I say philosopher, I don't mean a person who works at a college who wears bad clothing, the corduroys and the sports coats that don't fit well. You don't have to be that kind of philosopher. I think we're all philosophers. If you're listening to this right now, I'd argue that you are a philosopher. And just like me, you might be a lay philosopher. Maybe you don't do it full time and read 5 books a week, but we're both philosophers. And we get to decide what kind of worldviews we're going to have, and we can add our own spin. And so one guy who, kind of my favorite voluntarist of all times, and this is Karl Wattner, and he has the website and before that the newsletter, actually the longest running newsletter in libertarian history. It is called The Voluntarist. His website is voluntarist.com, and he is one of my favorites because he has kind of combined another great interest of his, which is Stoicism, with voluntarism. So he takes the best of Stoicism stoicism and adds it. And I just love a lot of his work for that reason. And he's very intellectually consistent and pure of heart. However, when he argues about his view of what voluntarism is, I would say, and I think he has said, that it's not up to him to decide what voluntarism is. And he is kind of the godfather of modern voluntarism, but he says himself, I don't have any right to tell you what you think a word means. I'll tell you what I think it means, and you can read that on his website under Fundamentals of Voluntarism. He has several great articles. But he said, no, we all get to make this choice for ourselves, what we think a word means. And I, like his, there are some other people that are voluntarists that I enjoy learning from. Now, I have noticed that in the voluntarist community, those of us that like to spread the good word, that believe in it, and tell other people about voluntarism, we do add our own personal little quirks. And many of the people that are into this are kind of the engineering mindset. We don't do so well with people, but we do really great with ideas and analyzing concepts and being true to the science, the social science. And in social science, logic, reason, those kinds of things are important to stick with, intellectual consistency. And sometimes I find that many of the voluntarists that put out wonderful content are a bit edgy, and they're sometimes rude, and they're sometimes not the most sweetie pie in presentation style. However, there's a lot of really good content there if you're willing to kind of sift through it, let them insult you here and there, and kind of just have a thick skin and forgive them for being a little bit weird. So that's just kind of a quick rundown of some of my thoughts of what voluntarism is. And let's get a little bit deeper into some of the quirks that I have in the next segment here. Stick with us.
Do you believe me now? I told you time